Three children stood silently at the grave of Vivian Caldwell, a woman they'd never met. Identical teardrops fell from their eyes, matching the crescent-shaped birthmarks on their wrists that glowed faintly in the cemetery's shadows. Just 20 feet away, Thaddeus Caldwell, tech mogul and heir to the Caldwell fortune, froze mid-step. He'd come to visit his mother's grave alone on the anniversary of her passing. Instead, he found three strangers mourning the woman who had raised him. Three strangers with the same crescent mark he'd hidden under expensive watches his entire life. Before we dive into this extraordinary story, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning had started like any other. For Thaddeus Caldwell, the 50-year-old CEO of Prism Innovations had awakened in his penthouse overlooking the Willowgate skyline, the cityscape glittering beneath him like the empire he'd built from nothing but ambition and his mother's unwavering belief in him. His personal chef had prepared his usual breakfast, a protein-rich meal designed for optimal performance, while his assistant, Lorelei, recited his schedule for the day. The board meeting is at 11, followed by lunch with the investors. From Singapore, your afternoon is blocked for the quarterly review and then cancel everything, Thaddeus interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. Lorelei paused, her tablet still in hand. In the 7 years she'd worked for him, Thaddeus Caldwell had never spontaneously cleared his schedule. His time was measured in million-dollar increments. Spontaneity wasn't in his vocabulary. Sir? It's the 15th of April, Lorelei. When her expression remained blank, he added, the anniversary of my mother's passing. Understanding dawned on her face. Of course, Mr. Caldwell. I'll reschedule everything. Thaddeus nodded, turning to stare out at the city his mother had never lived to see him conquer. Vivian Caldwell had died 12 years ago, taking with her the only genuine warmth he'd ever known. The emptiness her death had left behind was something even his $7 billion net worth couldn't fill. The drive to Evershadow Cemetery took 40 minutes, the sleek black Bentley carrying him from the glass and steel center of Willowgate to its historic outskirts, where ancient oaks stood sentinel over generations of the city's departed. Thaddeus preferred to visit alone, dismissing his driver at the ornate wrought-iron gates. I'll call when I need you, Garrison, he said, stepping out into the cool April air. The cemetery's grounds were immaculate, as befitting the final resting place of Willowgate's elite. The Caldwell family mausoleum stood on the cemetery's highest point, a small marble temple that housed 6 generations of his ancestors. But Vivian hadn't wanted to be entombed there. Too cold, she told Thaddeus years before her death. When I go, put me under the sky where the moonlight can find me. So he had, against the protests of his sister Isolde, who had insisted on tradition. Thaddeus had honored his mother's wishes. Vivian's grave lay beneath a flowering cherry tree, marked by a simple stone bearing only her name, her dates, and the words, "Beloved by the moon and stars." Thaddeus followed the familiar path, the bouquet of white lilies, her favorite, clutched in his hand. As he rounded the final bend, he heard something that stopped him mid-stride, the unmistakable sound of children crying. He slowed his pace, irritation rising at the intrusion on what should have been a private moment of remembrance. But as he approached, the irritation transformed into confusion. 3 children, 2 girls, and a boy, who appeared to be around 12 years old, stood in front of his mother's grave. They were dressed in mismatched but clean clothes, clearly not expensive but well cared for. Their dark hair caught the dappled sunlight filtering through the cherry blossoms, creating halos of light around their heads. Most striking was their obvious relation to each other. They were triplets, identical except for their genders, with the same heart-shaped faces, olive complexion, and delicate features. They clutched small bundles of wildflowers in their hands, laying them gently on Vivian's grave. "Who are you?" Thaddeus demanded, his voice sharper than he'd intended. The triplets startled in unison, spinning to face him with identical expressions. Of alarm! The boy stepped protectively in front of his sisters. "We're sorry, sir," he said, his voice steady despite the tear tracks on his cheeks. "We didn't mean any disrespect." "That doesn't answer my question," Thaddeus replied, moving closer. "This is my mother's grave. What business do you have here?" The slightly taller of the two girls spoke next, her chin tilted upward in defiance, despite her obvious nervousness. "Our mom told us to bring flowers and say thank you to Miss Vivian every year on this day." "Your mother?" Thaddeus frowned. "Who is your mother? Why would she send you to a stranger's grave?" "She's not a stranger to us," the smaller girl said quietly. "Mom says Miss Vivian was our guardian angel." Thaddeus studied them more carefully. There was something familiar about them, something he couldn't quite place. Then the boy shifted his weight, and the sleeve of his too large sweater rode up, revealing a mark on his inner wrist. A crescent moon, its points facing upward. Exactly. Like the one Thaddeus had carried since birth. Thaddeus felt his breath catch. Without thinking, he reached forward and grabbed the boy's arm, pushing back the sleeve to expose the mark fully. "Hey!" the taller girl protested, trying to pull her brother away. But Thaddeus barely heard her. His focus narrowed to the birthmark. Identical to his own. Identical to his mother's. Identical to every Caldwell, for as far back as family records existed. "Who are you?" he asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. The smaller girl, seemingly less frightened than her siblings, stepped forward. "I'm Meredith. This is my brother Kian and my sister Zara. Our last name is Reed." Reed. The name meant nothing to Thaddeus. He released the boy's arm, his mind racing. "And your mother, what's her name?" "Valencia Reed," Kian answered, rubbing his wrist where Thaddeus had gripped it. "She owns Tidal Pages on Harbor Street." Thaddeus shook his head. The name meant nothing to him either. Yet these children bore the Caldwell mark, a distinctive crescent that family legend claimed had appeared on the first Caldwell's wrist as a blessing from the moon itself. "Why does your mother send you here? How did she know Vivian Caldwell?" The triplets exchanged glances, seeming to communicate without words in that mysterious way that multiples often can. "Mom doesn't talk about it much," Zara finally said. "Just that Miss Vivian helped us when no one else would, and that we should always remember her kindness." Thaddeus looked from the children to his mother's grave and back again. The Caldwell birthmark was no coincidence. These children were connected to his family somehow, and his mother had kept that connection secret from him. "Where is your mother now?" he asked, his tone softer. "At the shop," Meredith answered. "We're supposed to go straight back after we leave the flowers." Thaddeus nodded, making a decision. "I'll drive you." The triplets looked alarmed again. "We're not supposed to go with strangers," Kian said firmly. Despite everything, Thaddeus found himself almost smiling at the boy's protective stance. "A wise rule. My name is Thaddeus Caldwell. Vivian was my mother." He pulled back his own sleeve, revealing the crescent mark that matched theirs. "And I think we need to speak with your mother about this." The children's eyes widened at the sight of his birthmark. Zara gasped. "You're him," she whispered. "The son." Something in her tone sent a chill through Thaddeus. "What do you know about me?" Meredith, seemingly the most forthcoming of the three, answered. "Just that Miss Vivian's son was very important and very busy, and that we should never bother him." The words stung, though Thaddeus couldn't explain why. "I'm not too busy to understand why three children I've never met share my family's birthmark." After some hesitation and another silent conference among themselves, the triplets agreed to let Thaddeus call his driver. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The ride to Harbour Street was quiet. The children huddled together on one side of the Bentley's spacious back seat, stealing glances at Thaddeus as if he might disappear at any moment. Tidal Pages turned out to be a small bookshop nestled between a cafe and an antique store, its blue facade painted with waves and sea creatures. Large windows displayed carefully arranged books, and a small bell chimed as Thaddeus pushed open the door, the triplets rushing in ahead of him. "Mom!" Kian called out. "We're back!" A woman emerged from behind a shelf of books, her dark hair pulled back in a loose bun, glasses perched on her nose. She smiled at the children until she noticed Thaddeus standing behind them. The smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of such profound shock that it seemed to age her a decade in seconds. "Kian Zara Meredith," she said, her voice remarkably steady despite her pallor. "Please go upstairs and start your homework." "But Mom," Zara began. "Now, please." The triplets obeyed, though reluctantly, glancing back at Thaddeus as they disappeared through a door marked private. When they were gone, the woman, Valencia Reed presumably, removed her glasses and faced Thaddeus directly. "I wondered if this day would come," she said quietly. Thaddeus studied her, searching for any recognition. She appeared to be in her mid-40s, with intelligent eyes and fine lines that spoke of both laughter and hardship. She was beautiful in an understated way, but he was certain they had never met. "Who are you?" he asked for what felt like the 100th time that day. "Why do your children have the Caldwell birthmark?" Valencia's hand moved unconsciously to her own wrist, though no mark was visible. "Perhaps we should sit down, Mr. Caldwell. This isn't a short story." She led him to a small reading nook at the back of the shop, away from the windows where curious passers-by might see them. Once they were seated, she poured 2 cups of tea from a pot that had been steeping on a small table. "Your mother loved Earl Grey," she said, offering him a cup. "Do you?" Thaddeus accepted the tea automatically, though he rarely drank anything. "But espresso or filtered water? How would you know what my mother loved?" Valencia took a deep breath. "Because Vivian Caldwell was my stepmother." The teacup froze halfway to Thaddeus's lips. "That's impossible. My mother was only married once, to my father." Valencia's smile was sad. "That's what the official Caldwell family history says." "Yes, but before she married your father, Vivian was briefly married to my father, Orion Reed." "You're lying," Thaddeus said flatly. "I would know if my mother had a previous marriage." "Would you?" Valencia asked gently. "You were what?" 6 years old when Isolde was born. Children that age don't typically question family histories. Thaddeus set down his teacup with a sharp click against the saucer. "Explain, then. If what you're saying is true, why have I never heard of you? And how do your children have our birthmark?" Valencia sighed, running a finger around the rim of her cup. "The Caldwell family, particularly your grandfather, didn't approve of my father. He was an artist, not wealthy or connected. When they married, Vivian was cut off financially. After 2 years, when she became pregnant with me, the pressure became too much. My father gave her a divorce so she could return to her family and security. That still doesn't explain." "I'm getting there," Valencia said, her voice steady. "My father raised me alone, telling me my mother had died. It wasn't until I was 18 that I found letters Vivian had written to him. She'd never stopped caring for us from afar, but her wealthy new husband, your father, wasn't to know about her past. It would have created a scandal the Caldwells couldn't abide." Valencia pulled up her sleeve, revealing her bare wrist. "I wasn't born with the crescent mark. Only those born to Vivian herself carry it. When I was 25, I sought her out privately. She was overjoyed to meet me, though we had to keep our relationship secret." Thaddeus felt reality shifting beneath him. My mother kept a secret daughter from us? She had no choice, Valencia replied. Your father would have never understood, and your sister Isolde was always watching, always reporting back to your grandfather. Vivienne had to protect her position for your sake. And the triplets? Thaddeus asked, struggling to process. Everything. When I found myself unexpectedly pregnant with triplets 12 years ago, my husband had just abandoned me. I was desperate. Vivienne helped secretly, sending money, making sure we had what we needed. Valencia's eyes grew distant. She was there when they were born. When she saw they all carried the crescent mark, she wept. She said it was the moon claiming them as true Caldwells, despite everything. Thaddeus ran a hand over his face, feeling the solid foundation of his life cracking beneath him. If this is true, if my mother was helping you financially, why are you running a small bookshop? Why aren't you living comfortably? Valencia's expression hardened slightly. Because when Vivienne died, the support stopped. I tried contacting the Caldwell estate, but all my letters were returned unopened. My calls were blocked. We lost our home, had to start over. This bookshop was all I could manage. Isolde, Thaddeus murmured, pieces falling into place. She handles all the family correspondence. Yes, Valencia nodded. I assume she intercepted everything. The triplets and I managed on our own, but I've always made sure they know about Vivienne's kindness. Thaddeus stood abruptly, pacing the small area. I need proof of this. You understand that? Of course. Valencia rose and went to the counter. From beneath it, she retrieved a weathered wooden box. Vivienne gave me this the last time I saw her. She said if anything happened to her, and if we ever truly needed help, I should show it to you, and only you. She handed him the box, which was carved with crescent moons and stars. Inside, Thaddeus found photographs. His mother as a young woman with a handsome, dark-haired man he didn't recognize. Letters written in his mother's distinctive handwriting, a marriage certificate, and most damning of all, a letter addressed to him, sealed with the Caldwell crest. With trembling fingers, Thaddeus broke the seal and unfolded the letter. My dearest Thaddeus, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and Valencia has finally sought your help. I have loved you fiercely every day of your life, but I have not been as honest with you as you deserved. Before I was your mother, I was, briefly, Valencia's. My first marriage to Orion Reed was the great passion of my youth, destroyed by your grandfather's disapproval and my own cowardice. Valencia is your half-sister, though not by blood. Her children, however, carry our mark, because they are Caldwells in the truest sense. They are your blood relatives through me. I cannot explain more in this letter, but Octavius Merritt, our family lawyer, has the full truth in documents I've left with him. Please, my son, do not let your sister Isolde's bitterness extend to Valencia and her children. They have done nothing to deserve such treatment. Show them the kindness and protection that is their birthright as Caldwells, even if they do not bear our name. Remember that family is more than bloodlines and birthrights. It is found in the connections we nurture and the love we choose to give. I have always been proud of you, and I know you will do what is right. All my love. Mother. Thaddeus lowered the letter, his mind reeling. If what this letter suggested was true, if the triplets were somehow his blood relatives through his mother, but not through Valencia, there was only one possible explanation, one that seemed too fantastical to believe. These children, he said slowly, raising his eyes to Valencia's. They're not your biological children, are they? Tears filled Valencia's eyes. Biologically, no. They're my heart's children in every way that matters. Then whose are they? Thaddeus demanded, though a terrible suspicion was already forming. Valencia's answer shattered what remained of Thaddeus's understanding of his family. They're your mother's children, Thaddeus, your brothers and sister. Vivienne was their biological mother. The bookshop seemed to spin around him as the impossible. Truth crashed through his defenses. His mother had secretly had triplets at the age of 62. Children she'd given to her stepdaughter to raise, rather than introduce them into the toxic Caldwell household, where Isolde's jealousy poisoned everything it touched. Children who shared his birthmark because they shared his blood. Siblings he'd never known existed until today. "That's not possible," he whispered, though the evidence was there in the matched crescents, in the familiar shape of Meredith's eyes, in Kian's determined chin, his mother's chin. "Advanced reproductive technology made it possible," Valencia said quietly. "Vivian had frozen her eggs decades earlier, long before such things were common. When I couldn't conceive after 3 years of trying, she offered them to me. My husband's DNA was used, but he left before they were born." Thaddeus sank back into his chair, the letter clutched in his hand. "So biologically, they're my mother's children with your ex-husband?" Valencia nodded. "Yes, Vivienne wanted to be part of their lives, but couldn't acknowledge them publicly. The scandal would have been enormous, and she feared what Isolde might do. Your sister had already tried to push Vivian out of the family business once she learned about her health issues." "Health issues?" Thaddeus looked up sharply. Valencia's expression softened with realization. "You didn't know. Vivian had been diagnosed with early-stage heart failure a year before the triplets were born. She wanted to leave something of herself behind, knowing she likely wouldn't see them grow up." Grief and anger collided in Thaddeus's chest. His mother had kept so many secrets from him, had suffered alone rather than turn to him for support. And Isolde, his own sister, had manipulated their mother's final years, had denied these children their birthright after her death. "Does Isolde know about them?" he asked. "I don't think so," Valencia replied. "Vivienne was extremely careful. But after she died, when all support stopped so suddenly, I suspected Isolde had found something in Vivienne's papers. I've been afraid for the children ever since." Thaddeus stood again, decision crystallizing. "I need to speak with Octavius Merritt immediately, and then we need to discuss your future, all of you." "You believe me?" Valencia asked, surprise evident in her voice. Thaddeus touched the crescent mark on his wrist, thinking of the 3 identical marks on 3 children who had his mother's eyes. "I believe my mother," he said simply, "and I believe what I can see with my own eyes." As he turned to leave, the door that led upstairs opened slightly, revealing 3 small faces peering down at them. "You can come down now," Valencia called, softly. The triplets descended slowly, still watching Thaddeus with wary eyes. "Are you really our brother?" Meredith asked, her directness reminding him painfully of Vivian. Thaddeus looked at these children, his siblings, and felt something shift within him, as if his heart were making room for connections he'd never anticipated. "It seems that I am," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Though I'm just learning this myself." Kian stepped forward, studying Thaddeus intently. "Will you make us leave our mom? Mom says rich people sometimes take children away if they think they can give them better lives." The question struck Thaddeus like a physical blow. "No," he said firmly, "I would never separate you from the woman who raised you. But I would like to know you, if you'll let me." Zara, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Ms. Vivian told us we had a brother who built towers that touched the sky. She said someday he might find us, and we shouldn't be afraid when he did." "You're not afraid of me now, are you?" Thaddeus asked gently. A small smile tugged at Zara's lips. "A little. You're very tall." Despite everything, Thaddeus found himself laughing. A genuine laugh that felt foreign after so many years of corporate smiles and strategic chuckles. "I suppose I am, from your perspective." Valencia watched this exchange with tears in her eyes. Your mother would be so happy to see this moment, she said softly. Thaddeus thought of all the moments his mother had missed, would miss with these children, with him. The years of separation that could never be recovered, all because of family pride and his sister's machinations. This is just the beginning, he said, looking from Valencia to the triplets. We have 12 years to make up for. And standing in the small bookshop, surrounded by the family he'd never known he had, Thaddeus Caldwell felt something he'd thought died with his mother 12 years ago: hope. As he prepared to leave, promising to return the next day after meeting with the family lawyer, Meredith approached him hesitantly. "Mom says you're very important," she said, looking up at him with eyes so like his mother's that it made his chest ache. Too important to waste time with kids like us. Thaddeus knelt down to her level. "Your mom is right that many people think I'm important, but she's wrong about one thing. There's nothing more important than family. And that's what we are, whether I knew it until today or not." "Will we get to see your towers that touch the sky?" Kian asked hopefully. Thaddeus smiled, already mentally redesigning his sterile penthouse to accommodate 3 energetic 12-year-olds. "Whenever you want." As he walked back to his waiting car, Thaddeus made 2 phone calls. The first was to Octavius Merritt, demanding an immediate meeting about his mother's secret documents. The second was to Lorelei. "Clear my schedule for the rest of the week," he instructed, "and find me the best family lawyer in the state. I have siblings to protect." What Thaddeus didn't know as he drove away from Tidal Pages was that across town, in the sleek offices of Caldwell Enterprises, Isolde Caldwell was receiving an urgent message from her source at Evershadow Cemetery. A message about her brother's strange encounter with 3 children at their mother's grave. Nor did he know that in the safe behind the painting in her office, Isolde kept a file labeled Read, containing every letter Valencia had ever sent, every attempt she had made to claim support for the triplets after Vivian's death, or that Isolde had spent 12 years ensuring those children would never lay claim to the Caldwell fortune, a mission she was not about to abandon simply because her brother had discovered their existence. The battle for the triplets' birthright was just beginning, and so was Thaddeus's journey to uncover the full truth about his mother's secret life and final wishes. Thaddeus arrived at the law offices of Merritt and Associates precisely at 9 the following morning, having barely slept. His mind had raced all night, revisiting memories of his mother, searching for clues he might have missed. Had there been signs of her secret life? Times when she'd been unavailable, phone calls she'd taken in private, unexplained absences. In retrospect, there had been many, all dismissed by his younger self as the natural privacy of adults. The receptionist recognized him immediately. "Mr. Caldwell, Mr. Merritt is expecting you. Right this way, please." Octavius Merritt had been the Caldwell family lawyer for over 40 years. At 78, he remained sharp as ever, his silver hair immaculately styled, his posture military straight as he rose from behind his desk to greet Thaddeus. "I wondered when this day would come," the old lawyer said, echoing Valencia's words from the previous day. "You knew," Thaddeus replied. It wasn't a question. Octavius gestured to a chair. "I've been your mother's confidant since before you were born, Thaddeus. I was there when she signed her divorce papers from Orion Reed. I was there when she agreed to marry your father, and I was there when she made arrangements for the triplets' future. Why didn't you tell me after she died?" Thaddeus demanded, anger seeping into his voice despite his attempt to remain composed. "Those children, my siblings, have been struggling while I had no idea they existed." The lawyer's eyes were compassionate but unapologetic. "I was bound by attorney-client privilege and your mother's explicit instructions. The documents were to be unsealed only if Valencia approached you directly or when the triplets turned 18, whichever came first." "Why would she wait so long?" Why keep them secret from me specifically? Octavius sighed, reaching for a folder on his desk. Your mother wasn't keeping the children from you, Thaddeus. She was keeping them from Isolde and your father's family. She feared what might happen if they discovered her using reproductive technology at her age. The scandal, certainly, but more importantly, the potential legal challenges to the children's status. Legal challenges. Your father's will contained specific clauses about heirs, as did your grandfather's trust, which still controls significant portions of Caldwell Enterprises. Your mother feared that if the triplets were discovered, Isolde would use those clauses to deny them any place in the family, legally or emotionally. Thaddeus leaned forward. And was she right? Octavius's expression turned grim. Shortly after your mother's death, Isolde came to me with questions about unusual transactions in Vivian's personal accounts. Regular payments to an entity called Luna Holdings, which was the shell corporation we'd created to support Valencia and the children. I claimed ignorance, but I believe she continued investigating privately. Could she have intercepted Valencia's attempts to contact the estate? Easily. Isolde took control of all family correspondence after Vivian passed. Nothing reached you without going through her first. Thaddeus felt cold fury building inside him. His own sister had deliberately kept his mother's children, his siblings, from him, condemning them to hardship while the Caldwell fortune sat untouched. I need to see everything, he said flatly. All the documentation, all the provisions my mother made for them. Octavius nodded and opened the folder. Vivian established a trust for the triplets. It was modest by Caldwell standards, $5 million, plus ownership of a small property on Lake Willowgate. She couldn't access more without raising suspicions with your father or Isolde. And what happened to this trust after she died? That's where things become complicated, Octavius said, his expression troubled. The trust was to transfer to Valencia as guardian until the triplets turned 25. However, there were irregularities in the execution. Approval signatures were delayed, documents misplaced. By the time I realized what was happening, the trust had been legally challenged and frozen. By whom? Thaddeus asked, though. He already knew the answer. Officially, by the Caldwell Family Trust, citing improper diversion of family assets. Unofficially. The lawyer left the sentence unfinished. Isolde, Thaddeus finished for him. But how? She wouldn't have known about the triplets. She didn't need to. She only needed to know that Vivian had established a separate trust with Caldwell money. That was enough for her to file an injunction blocking the disbursement on the grounds that all Vivian's assets should revert to the main family holdings upon her death. Thaddeus stood, pacing the elegant office. So my mother died, thinking her children would be provided for, while my sister systematically dismantled those provisions without even knowing who she was hurting. I believe so, yes. Can the trust be unfrozen? Octavius tapped the folder thoughtfully. With your support as CEO and primary shareholder of Caldwell Enterprises, yes. It would require challenging Isolde's actions directly, which would inevitably lead to questions about the beneficiaries. Let them ask, Thaddeus said firmly. I want everything restored, everything my mother intended for them. There's something else you should know, the lawyer said, removing a sealed envelope from the folder. This contains the results of genetic testing Vivian had done before she died. She wanted absolute verification that the triplets were genetically hers in case their status was ever questioned. Thaddeus accepted the envelope but didn't open it. I don't need this to know they're her children. I saw their birthmarks. Octavius smiled slightly. The famous Caldwell Crescent. Your mother believed it was proof enough as well. But in today's world, legal proof requires more scientific evidence. As Thaddeus prepared to leave with copies of all the relevant documents, the lawyer placed a hand on his arm. Thaddeus, be careful. Isolde has spent 12 years building her position within Caldwell Enterprises. She won't surrender control easily, especially to siblings whose existence threatens everything she's worked for. I'm not asking her to surrender anything, Thaddeus replied coldly, but she will acknowledge our mother's wishes and these children's rights. And if she refuses? Thaddeus's expression hardened. Then she'll learn that I'm not the complacent brother she thinks I am. The Caldwell Enterprises headquarters dominated the Willowgate skyline, a gleaming spire of glass and steel that reflected the sun like a beacon. Thaddeus hadn't intended to confront Isolde immediately. He'd planned to gather more information, consult with the family lawyers he'd retained to represent the triplets' interests. But something drew him to the building that bore his name. As he rode the private elevator to the executive floor, he reviewed what he knew. His mother had secretly given birth to triplets through a surrogate at age 62. She had hidden them from the family, entrusting them to her stepdaughter, Valencia. After her death, Isolde had, intentionally or not, cut off the financial support that should have gone to the children, leaving them and Valencia struggling. The elevator doors opened directly into the executive suite. His assistant, Lorelei, looked up in surprise. "Mr. Caldwell, we weren't expecting you until next week." "Is my sister in her office?" he asked, ignoring her confusion. "Yes, but she's in a meeting with..." Thaddeus was already moving past her desk, striding down the corridor toward Isolde's domain. He pushed open the double doors without knocking. Isolde Caldwell sat behind an imposing desk, her platinum hair pulled back in a severe style that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and cold blue eyes. At 46, she remained striking, though the warmth that had occasionally softened their mother's similar features was entirely absent from Isolde's. She was meeting with two board members who looked up in surprise at Thaddeus's entrance. "Brother," Isolde said smoothly, betraying no sign of irritation at the interruption. "What an unexpected pleasure. Gentlemen, if you'll excuse us." The men departed quickly, sensing the tension in the air. When the doors closed behind them, Isolde's polite mask slipped slightly. "This is highly irregular, Thaddeus. You've been practically a ghost around here for months, and now you burst into my meeting without warning." Thaddeus remained standing, studying his sister with new eyes. Had she always been this cold? Or had the years of ambition hardened her into something their mother wouldn't recognize? "I visited Mother's grave yesterday," he said, watching her carefully. A flicker of something, wariness perhaps, crossed Isolde's face before disappearing. "The anniversary. I sent flowers. My schedule wouldn't allow a personal visit." "Your schedule never allows for sentiment, does it, Isolde?" She raised an eyebrow. "We can't all indulge in monthly pilgrimages to Evershadow. Someone has to keep this company running while you pursue your personal projects." Thaddeus placed his hands on her desk, leaning forward. "I met some interesting people at the cemetery. 3 children visiting Mother's grave, children with our birthmark." Isolde's composure slipped just for an instant. Her hand moved unconsciously to her own wrist, where the crescent mark that all Caldwells bore was hidden beneath an expensive bracelet. "What nonsense is this?" she asked, but there was a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there before. "Not nonsense, sister. Mother's children, my siblings, your siblings." Isolde stood abruptly. "You've lost your mind. Mother was 62 when she died. Those children couldn't be hers. Reproductive technology makes many things possible." Thaddeus replied, watching as Isolde's face paled slightly. "As I believe you already know." "I don't know what you're talking about," she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "Lunar Holdings," Thaddeus said quietly. "The trust Mother established for her children, which was mysteriously frozen after her death. Valencia reads letters returned unopened. All coincidences, sister." Isolde's eyes narrowed. "You've spoken with that woman." The confirmation was in her tone. She knew exactly who Valencia was. Yes, and with our siblings, whom you've allowed to live in poverty while we control billions. They are not our siblings, Isolde hissed, abandoning all pretense. They're the result of our mother's senile sentimentality in her final years, a desperate attempt to reclaim her youth by creating new children when her existing ones disappointed her. The accusation stung, but Thaddeus refused to be distracted. They bear our mark, Isolde. They carry our blood. Mother wanted them provided for, and you deliberately subverted her wishes. I protected our family legacy, she retorted. Do you have any idea what would happen if word got out that Vivian Caldwell used frozen eggs to have children in her 60s? The board would question her mental competency, casting doubt on every decision she made in her final years, including naming you CEO. Thaddeus stared at his sister, finally understanding. This was never about scandal or family honor. You were afraid she'd leave the company to her new children instead of us. Isolde laughed bitterly. Of course she would have. She doted on you until you became too involved with the business to spend time with her. Then she turned to me until I proved too ambitious for her taste. She was looking for the perfect heir, the perfect child. When we disappointed her, she tried to create new ones. That's not what happened, and I think you know it, Thaddeus said quietly. Mother helped Valencia have children because she couldn't conceive naturally. She kept them secret to protect them from exactly this kind of bitterness. Believe whatever fairy tale helps you sleep at night, Isolde replied dismissively. What do you want, Thaddeus? Money for them? Fine. Set up a trust, but they will never be acknowledged Caldwells, never take our name, and never have a claim on this company. Thaddeus straightened, looking at his sister with something between pity and disgust. I've already instructed the legal team to unfreeze Mother's original trust, but that's just the beginning. Those children will take their rightful place in this family, whether you approve or not. Isolde's expression turned dangerous. Be careful, brother. You may be CEO, but I have allies on the board who might question your judgment if you push this unusual situation, especially given your recent absences. Are you threatening me, Isolde? I'm advising you, as your loving sister. The smile she gave him didn't reach her eyes. Family comes first, after all. Thaddeus turned to leave, then paused at the door. You know what's truly sad, Isolde? Mother's greatest fear wasn't scandal or damage to the Caldwell name. It was that you'd hurt those children out of jealousy. She was right about you in the end. He closed the door on Isolde's furious expression, already pulling out his phone to call Octavius. The lawyer had been right. This would not be resolved easily or quietly. Later that afternoon, Thaddeus returned to Tidal Pages. The small bookshop was busy with after-school customers, mostly teenagers browsing the young adult section and children excited about new comic books. Valencia looked up from the register, surprise briefly crossing her face before she composed herself. I didn't expect you back so soon, she said when there was a lull in customers. I've spoken with Octavius and with my sister, Thaddeus replied. We need to talk. Are the children here? Valencia nodded, glancing toward the back of the store. They're helping stock the new delivery. Should I call them? Not yet. I'd like to speak with you first. They retreated to the same reading nook as the previous day. Valencia looked tired, the strain of yesterday's revelations evident in the shadows beneath her eyes. Isolde knew about you, Thaddeus said without preamble. Not about the triplets, specifically, but she knew of your connection to our mother and deliberately intercepted your communications after her death. Valencia didn't look surprised. I suspected as much. Whenever I called the estate, the same woman always told me Mrs. Caldwell had no record of anyone named Reed and that my attempts at fraud would be reported to authorities if I persisted. That would be Isolde's personal assistant, Thaddeus confirmed grimly. She's frozen the trust mother set up for the children, claiming improper use of family assets. So there was a trust, Valencia said softly. Vivienne mentioned arrangements, but never specifics. She said it was safer if I didn't know details. $5 million, Thaddeus told her, plus a lake house property, not a fortune by Caldwell. Standards, but enough to ensure you and the children would never struggle. Valencia closed her eyes briefly. All this time. We lost our apartment 6 months after Vivian died. I had to pull the triplets from their school when I couldn't afford the tuition. We lived in my car for 3 weeks before I found this place. The matter-of-fact recounting of their hardships hit Thaddeus harder than any accusation could have. These were his siblings, his blood, reduced to homelessness while he lived in unimaginable luxury. I'm going to make this right, he promised. The trust will be unfrozen, with interest for all these years. You'll have everything Mother intended for you and more. Valencia looked at him carefully. And what do you want in return? The question startled him. Nothing. They're my siblings. You could have written a check yesterday if financial support was your only concern, Valencia pointed out. But you're here again. Why? Thaddeus considered her question seriously. Because I lost my mother 12 years ago, and yesterday I discovered I have 3 siblings I never knew existed. I've spent my life surrounded by wealth and power, but very little genuine connection. I want to know them, Valencia. I want to be part of their lives, if they'll let me. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. They've always wondered about their Caldwell heritage. Vivienne told them stories about the family history, the meaning of the crescent mark. They know they belong to something larger than themselves. They do, Thaddeus agreed, but I need to be honest with you about something else. Isolde will fight this. She sees them as threats to her position, to her inheritance. It won't be easy bringing them into the Caldwell fold. We don't need the Caldwell name or fortune, Valencia said firmly. We've managed this long without it. If recognizing them publicly will only bring them pain. It's not about the name or the money, Thaddeus interrupted. It's about honoring who they are. Mother wanted them to know their heritage, their history. She wouldn't have given them the birthmark otherwise. Valencia's brow furrowed. Given them the birthmark. The crescent is a genetic trait, isn't it? Thaddeus stared at her in confusion. Of course it is. All Caldwells are born with it. But I thought... Valencia trailed off, looking troubled. Never mind, it's not important. Before Thaddeus could press her, the triplets emerged from the back of the store, carrying stacks of books. They stopped when they saw him, exchanging those quick, silent glances that seemed to constitute a private language. You came back, Meredith said, stepping forward first as usual. We didn't think you would. I promised I would, Thaddeus replied, stung by the implied accusation, but understanding it nonetheless. These children had experienced too many broken promises in their young lives. Are you going to take us to see your buildings now? Kian asked, hope creeping into his voice despite his obvious attempt to appear nonchalant. Thaddeus looked to Valencia, who nodded slightly. If you've finished your work here, yes. I thought we might have dinner as well. There's a lot we should talk about. 20 minutes later, the triplets were wide-eyed in the back of Thaddeus's Bentley as Garrison drove them through the gleaming downtown district of Willowgate. Zara pressed her face against the window as they passed the soaring towers of the financial district. Is that one yours? She asked, pointing to a particularly impressive skyscraper. That's Caldwell Tower, Thaddeus confirmed. The company, headquarters. "And we're really related to you?" Kian asked for perhaps the third time since they'd left the bookshop. "Actually related, not just pretend related." "Really related," Thaddeus assured him. "We share the same mother, which makes us half-siblings." "But we never knew her," Meredith said, a note of sadness in her voice. "Not really. She visited us sometimes, but Mom says it had to be secret." "She loved you very much," Thaddeus told them, the lump in his throat making it difficult to speak. "She would have been with you openly if she could have." "Why couldn't she?" Zara asked. It was a complicated question with no child-appropriate answer. How did one explain to 12-year-olds the complexities of family reputation, reproductive, technology ethics, and the vicious internal politics of wealthy dynasties? "There were obstacles," Thaddeus said carefully. "People who wouldn't have understood or accepted your place in the family. Mother was trying to protect you until the time was right." "You mean your sister?" Meredith said with unexpected perception. "Mom always gets quiet when she talks about her." Thaddeus exchanged a glance with Valencia, who had insisted on accompanying them. She shrugged slightly as if to say, "They're more perceptive than you think." "My sister Isolde is complicated," Thaddeus acknowledged. "She and I don't always see eye to eye on family matters." "Is she going to be mad that we exist?" Kian asked bluntly. "Kian!" Valencia scolded, but Thaddeus raised a hand. "It's a fair question," he said. "And yes, Isolde will likely be unhappy about this situation, but that's not your concern or your fault. It's something for adults to handle." The triplets seemed to accept this answer, though Thaddeus noted the worried glance that passed between them. They understood more than he was giving them credit for. The car pulled up in front of the grand Willowgate Hotel, where Thaddeus had reserved a private dining room. He'd considered taking them to his penthouse, but sensed they might be more comfortable in neutral territory for this first real meeting. As they entered the opulent lobby, he watched their reactions carefully. Zara's eyes widened at the massive crystal chandelier. Kian tried to appear unimpressed but couldn't help staring at the ornate marble staircase. Meredith, ever practical, stayed close to Valencia, holding her hand tightly. They were seated in a secluded room with views of the city skyline. The table, elegant but not intimidatingly formal. Thaddeus had requested a menu that included options children might enjoy alongside more sophisticated fare. He wanted them to feel welcome, not overwhelmed. As they settled in, an uncomfortable silence fell. Despite the questions in the car, the children seemed suddenly shy, unsure how to interact with this stranger who claimed to be their brother. Thaddeus himself felt uncharacteristically awkward, accustomed to commanding boardrooms, but utterly unprepared for family dinner conversation with three 12-year-olds. Valencia, sensing the tension, stepped in. "Perhaps Thaddeus could tell you about some of his memories of your mother. Would you like that?" The triplets nodded eagerly, and Thaddeus felt a rush of gratitude toward her. "Mother loved gardens," he began, smiling at a memory. "She had the most remarkable green thumb. At our family estate, Moonfall Manor, she created what she called her midnight garden, plants that bloomed in the evening or had silvery foliage that caught the moonlight. She used to tell me that the Caldwell crescent was the moon's blessing on our family, and that we were at our best after dark, when the stars came out." "She told us that too," Zara exclaimed, "about the moon blessing. She said that's why we have the marks on our wrists." "She would sit with us sometimes and point out constellations," Kian added, warming to the conversation. "She knew all of them, even the really hard ones." "She taught me that too when I was young," Thaddeus said softly. "I'd forgotten." As the meal progressed, the initial awkwardness gradually dissolved. The triplets grew more animated, sharing small details about their lives. Meredith's interest in mathematics, Kian's skill at soccer, Zara's love of painting. Thaddeus listened intently, mentally cataloging each revelation about these young Siblings he was just beginning to know. When dessert arrived, an elaborate chocolate creation that drew gasps from the children, Thaddeus decided it was time to address more serious matters. "I want you to know," he said carefully, "that I'm working to restore what Mother intended for you. There was a trust established for your care that was misplaced after she died. I'm having it corrected." Valencia looked up sharply. "Thaddeus, we don't need to discuss this now." "I think we do," he insisted gently. "They should understand that things will be changing." "What kind of things?" Meredith asked, instantly alert. Thaddeus measured his words. "Financial support, for one. Mother wanted to ensure you had the best education, opportunities, everything you might need. And there's a house by the lake that belongs to you." "A whole house?" Kian's eyes widened. "Just for us?" "Just for you," Thaddeus confirmed. "It was Mother's special retreat. She loved it there." "We can't just accept," Valencia began, but Thaddeus cut her off. "It's not charity, Valencia. It's their inheritance, what Mother wanted them to have all along." Zara, who had been quietly absorbing the conversation, spoke up. "If we have this trust thing and a house, does that mean we don't need our bookshop anymore?" The question revealed a child's understanding of adult financial concerns, but also a touching attachment to the life they knew. Valencia smiled at her. "Tidal Pages is our home, sweetheart. No matter what happens, we'll keep it. It's part of who we are." Thaddeus nodded in agreement. "The trust doesn't change who you are or the life you've built. It just removes some of the worries and adds new possibilities." "Like what?" Kian asked. "Like the best schools if you want them. Sports equipment, art supplies, travel, whatever interest you develop." The triplets exchanged another of their silent communications. Then Meredith, seeming to speak for all of them, asked the question Thaddeus had been dreading. "Will we see you again after tonight, or is this just about the money?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. "Of course you'll see me again," he said firmly. "If you want to, that is. You're my family. I'd like to be part of your lives in whatever way feels comfortable for all of you." "What about your sister?" Kian pressed. "Will we meet her too?" Thaddeus hesitated, looking to Valencia for guidance. She gave a small shrug, leaving the decision to him. "Isolde needs time," he said finally. "She's not ready to meet you yet." "Because she doesn't think we're really Caldwells," Meredith stated with that uncanny perception. "Even though we have the marks." "The marks are proof enough for me," Thaddeus assured them. "And in time, there'll be proof enough for others as well." As the evening drew to a close, Valencia insisted it was time to get the children home. School awaited them the next day, despite the extraordinary circumstances. Thaddeus arranged for Garrison to drive them back to the bookshop, promising to call tomorrow to continue their discussions about the future. As they prepared to leave, the private dining room, Zara unexpectedly approached Thaddeus and wrapped her arms around his waist in a quick, shy hug. "Thank you for telling us about our mother," she whispered. "No one ever does." Thaddeus felt his throat constrict with emotion as he awkwardly returned the embrace. "I'll tell you anything you want to know about her any time." After they left, Thaddeus remained at the table, nursing a glass of whiskey and contemplating the strange turns his life had taken in just 2 days. He had gone from a solitary existence focused entirely on business to discovering 3 siblings who carried his mother's legacy and the responsibility for protecting them from his sisters. Machinations. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The caller ID showed Octavius Merritt. "I've been reviewing the documentation more carefully," the lawyer said, without preamble. "There's an irregularity in the trust establishment that troubles me." "What kind of irregularity?" Thaddeus asked, instantly alert. "The genetic verification your mother requested. It's missing from the sealed records. The envelope I gave you today should contain those results, but in the official trust documentation, there's only a placeholder. No actual test results." "Could they have been removed?" "Possibly. Octavius sounded troubled. But more concerning is what I found in Vivian's private medical records, which she had sealed until the triplets turned 18. She had a partial hysterectomy in her 30s, Thaddeus, after complications from Isolde's birth. The eggs used for the triplets' conception couldn't have been hers. Thaddeus felt a chill run through him. What are you saying? I'm saying that either there's documentation missing that would explain this discrepancy or the story of the triplets' origin isn't what we've been told. Thaddeus thought of the birthmarks, the undeniable Caldwell eyes, the crescent moons that had marked his family for generations. If the triplets weren't conceived from his mother's eggs, how could they bear the family mark so distinctly? I need answers, Octavius. Keep digging, and don't share this with anyone, not even Valencia, until we understand what it means. As he ended the call, Thaddeus stared out at the Willowgate skyline, the city lights reflecting in the darkened window. Somewhere in his mother's past lay a secret even more complex than he'd imagined, a secret that might change everything he thought he knew about the triplets, about Valencia, and about the Caldwell legacy itself. And somewhere across town, in her office at Caldwell Enterprises, Isolde Caldwell was making calls of her own, calls that would set in motion a plan to protect the empire she believed was rightfully hers, no matter who stood in her way. Dawn found Thaddeus already awake, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse as the first light touched Willowgate's skyline. Sleep had proven impossible after Octavius's revelation. If his mother hadn't been the biological source of the triplets, then who was? And why would she claim children who weren't genetically hers? His coffee grew cold as he turned the questions over in his mind. The birthmarks were undeniable, the distinctive crescent that had marked Caldwell's for generations, yet the medical records suggested his mother couldn't have provided the eggs for their conception. The most troubling thought was whether Valencia knew. Had she been complicit in a deception, or was she also a victim of whatever complex web his mother had woven around these children? His phone interrupted his thoughts. The caller ID showed Octavius. "I've been working through the night," the lawyer said, his voice gravelly with fatigue. "There was a sealed addendum to your mother's will, to be opened only if questions arose. About the triplets' parentage. I've had it in secure storage all these years." "And?" Thaddeus prompted when the lawyer paused. "You need to see it yourself. Can you come to the office immediately?" 30 minutes later, Thaddeus sat in Octavius's office, staring at the documents spread before him. His mother's elegant handwriting filled several pages, accompanied by medical records and DNA test results. As he read, the truth emerged, a truth far more complex and shocking than he'd imagined. "She used her own preserved tissue," Thaddeus said quietly when he'd finished, looking up at Octavius in astonishment. "From before her surgery." The lawyer nodded. Vivian was forward-thinking in ways that were almost prescient. When she was 34 and faced with the hysterectomy, she had her doctor preserve ovarian tissue. It was experimental then, still is to some extent, but it allowed her cells to be used years later to create eggs through a complex medical process. "So, the triplets really are her biological children," Thaddeus confirmed. "Yes, though the process was more complicated than she initially explained to Valencia. I suspect she simplified the story rather than delving into experimental reproductive technology." "And the birthmarks? Could they truly be genetic?" Octavius smiled faintly. "Your mother believed so utterly. The Caldwell crescent has appeared on family members for at least 8 generations. Science may not be able to explain it, but the evidence is on the children's wrists. And yours." Thaddeus felt relief wash over him, followed immediately by a new concern. "Isolde will demand verification, DNA testing. Which is precisely why Vivian prepared this documentation. She knew questions would arise eventually. Does Valencia know the full truth? I don't believe so. Vivian thought it safer for everyone if the details remained confidential. Fewer people who knew meant fewer who could reveal the secret prematurely. Thaddeus gathered the documents. I need to speak with Valencia. She deserves to know everything before we move forward. As he stood to leave, Octavius placed a weathered hand on his arm. There's one more thing, Thaddeus. Your sister came to see me late last night. Thaddeus tensed. What did she want? Information about the trust, primarily. But she also made veiled inquiries about the triplets' parentage. She's conducting her own investigation, and I don't think she'll like what she finds. Why not? Confirmation that they're truly mother's children should satisfy her doubts. Octavius's expression turned grave. Because the DNA results also confirm their paternity. They're not just Vivian's children, they're Caldwell's through and through. The title pages was closed when Thaddeus arrived, a family emergency sign hanging in the window. Concern tightened his chest as he tried the door, finding it locked. He called Valencia's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. A small cafe across the street caught his attention. He'd noticed the triplets getting hot chocolate there yesterday. Inside, the barista recognized him immediately. You're looking for Valencia and the kids? She asked, wiping her hands on her apron. They left about an hour ago, seemed in a hurry. Did they say where they were going? Thaddeus asked, anxiety building. No, but that lawyer lady was with them. Lawyer? What lawyer? The barista shrugged. Fancy suit, expensive briefcase. Said she represented the Caldwell estate. Isolde. It had to be someone working for his sister. Thaddeus thanked the barista and hurried out, already calling Garrison to bring the car around. As he waited, he tried Valencia's phone again. This time, surprisingly, she answered. Valencia? Where are you? Are the children with you? Her voice was tight with stress. Your sister's lawyer came to the shop this morning. She had documentation showing the trust had been permanently dissolved due to fraudulent claims. She said we needed to come to Caldwell Tower immediately to discuss resolving the situation. Don't go there, Thaddeus said sharply. Isolde is manipulating you. I have the proof about the triplets' parentage. They're truly mother's biological children. There was a pause. Then Valencia's voice confused. Of course they are. Why would you think otherwise? It's complicated. Where are you now? At the lake house. The lawyer said we should see the property we were falsely claiming. Thaddeus. She had photographs of some kind of medical records. She said proof that the triplets couldn't possibly be Vivian's children. She's lying. Stay there. I'm coming to you now. Drill. Moonlight Cottage sat on the shores of Lake Willowgate, about 30 minutes outside the city. The small Cape Cod-style house had been Vivian's personal retreat, separate from the imposing Caldwell estate. Thaddeus remembered visiting as a child before his father's disapproval of unnecessary properties had made such trips rare. As Garrison drove through the wooded lane leading to the cottage, Thaddeus reviewed what he'd learned from Octavius. The triplets were indeed Vivian's biological children, conceived through preserved ovarian tissue and a complex medical procedure. But the revelation about their paternity had been the true shock. According to the DNA results his mother had secretly obtained, the triplets' father was none other than Orion Reed, Valencia's father and Vivian's first husband. It explained so much. Vivian's choice to entrust the children to Valencia specifically, the secrecy surrounding their conception, the elaborate trust arrangements. The triplets weren't just Thaddeus's half-siblings through their mother. They were also Valencia's half-siblings through their father. The car rounded the final bend, and the cottage came into view. Valencia's modest sedan was parked in the gravel drive. alongside a sleek black town car that Thaddeus recognized immediately as belonging to Isolde's personal assistant. "Wait here," he instructed Garrison, already moving toward the house. The front door was unlocked. Inside, voices carried from the sunroom that overlooked the lake. Thaddeus moved quietly through the familiar space, noting that little had changed since his childhood visits. His mother had maintained the cottage exactly as it had been during her first marriage, a small shrine to what might have been. "You must understand," a crisp female voice was saying. "The Caldwell family cannot allow this deception to continue. The documentation is quite clear." "I don't understand any of this," Valencia replied, her voice strained. "Vivian herself told me they were her children, and perhaps in her declining mental state, she believed that," the woman continued smoothly. "But the medical facts don't lie. Now, if you'll just sign these papers renouncing any claim to Caldwell assets, we can arrange a generous one-time settlement to help you relocate. Somewhere far from Willowgate would be ideal." Thaddeus stepped into the doorway of the sunroom. Valencia sat on a faded floral sofa, the triplets clustered protectively around her. Across from them stood Margot Wells, Isolde's razor-sharp personal attorney, holding out a document and a pen. "She won't be signing anything," Thaddeus said coldly. Everyone turned. The triplets' expressions brightened momentarily before uncertainty crept back in. Valencia looked torn between relief and confusion. Margot merely raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Caldwell, how unexpected." Her tone suggested it was anything but. "I'm simply trying to resolve this unfortunate situation quietly, as your sister requested." "Duh. My sister has no authority in this matter," Thaddeus replied, moving to stand beside Valencia and the children. "And there's nothing to resolve. These children are exactly who my mother claimed they were, her biological offspring and legitimate Caldwells." Margot's practiced smile didn't waver. "I have documentation indicating otherwise. Medical records confirming Vivian Caldwell's partial hysterectomy years before these children were born. Ooh, and I have documentation proving she used preserved ovarian tissue in an advanced medical procedure," Thaddeus countered, removing the folder from his jacket, "along with DNA results confirming her maternity. Would you like to see them? Or would you prefer to explain to your law partners why you attempted to coerce signatures based on incomplete information?" The threat was clear. Margot's smile faltered slightly as she considered her options. Finally, she gathered her papers. "I'll need to consult with Ms. Caldwell about these new developments." "You do that," Thaddeus said, "and tell my sister I expect her at Octavius's office tomorrow morning at 9. This ends now." When Margot had departed, Valencia turned to Thaddeus, her expression troubled. "Why would you think? They weren't Vivian's children. What's really going on here?" "Perhaps the children should explore the grounds while we talk," Thaddeus suggested gently. "This house and property belong to them, after all. They should get to know it." The triplets looked reluctant to leave, clearly sensing the tension in the room. But curiosity about their new home won out, and they filed outside after Valencia assured them she'd be fine. When they were alone, Thaddeus sat beside her on the sofa. "There's something you don't know, Valencia. Something Mother kept from all of us." He explained what he'd learned from Octavius, the preserved tissue, the experimental procedure, and finally, the DNA results confirming Orion Reed as the triplets' biological father. Valencia stared at him in shock. "My father? But they're your half-siblings," Thaddeus confirmed gently, "as well as mine. Mother used your father's preserved genetic material alongside her own. I don't know how she obtained it or why she chose not to tell you the full truth." Valencia stood abruptly, moving to the window where she could see the triplets exploring the lakefront. "She told me the donor was anonymous," she said quietly. That she'd chosen someone with artistic talents to balance the Caldwell business. Acumen. A sad smile touched her lips. I always thought they had something of my father in them. Zara's love of painting, Keon's musical ear. I attributed it to coincidence or to my own wishful thinking. Mother must have had her reasons for keeping it from you, Thaddeus said. Perhaps she thought it would complicate your relationship with them. Valencia nodded slowly. She knew I would have seen them differently, not just as my children, but as my siblings too. It might have made everything more confusing for all of us. She turned back to face him. Does Isolde know? Not yet, but she will tomorrow at the meeting with Octavius. She needs to understand that these children are Caldwell's twice over, through both Vivian and Orion. Their claim to the family legacy is beyond dispute. Valencia's expression hardened unexpectedly. I don't want them used as pawns in a Caldwell power struggle. They've been through enough. This isn't about power, Thaddeus insisted. It's about their birthright. The trust Mother established, this house, their place in the family, all of it belongs to them. And what about their place in my life? Valencia asked quietly. I've raised them as my children. They call me Mom. Will that change now? Thaddeus recognized the fear beneath her question. Nothing has to change that doesn't make sense for all of you. You are their mother in every way that matters. Biology is just one small part of parenthood. Valencia seemed to accept this, though concern still shadowed her eyes. Isolde won't give up easily. No, Thaddeus agreed grimly. She won't. The following morning, the conference room at Merritt and Associates was tense with unspoken hostilities. Isolde sat ramrod straight in her chair, flanked by Margot Wells and another Caldwell Enterprises attorney. Across from them, Thaddeus sat beside Valencia, with Octavius at the head of the table. The triplets had been left at Moonlight Cottage, with Garrison keeping watch. This confrontation was not for children. Let's get to the point, Isolde said briskly. You claim to have proof these children are Mother's biological offspring, despite her medical history. I'd like to see it. Octavius slid copies of the documentation across the table, medical records, detailed explanations of the advanced reproductive procedures used, and finally, the DNA results. As you can see, the old lawyer explained as Isolde reviewed the papers with growing disbelief, Vivienne used tissue preserved before her surgery. The procedure was experimental but successful. The triplets are, without question, her biological children. Isolde looked up, her expression cold. Even if I accept this, which I'm not prepared to do without independent verification, it doesn't explain why Mother would hide these children, give them to a virtual stranger to raise, and keep their existence secret from her own family. Not a stranger, Thaddeus said quietly. Family. Valencia is Mother's stepdaughter from her first marriage, and the triplets' father is Orion Reed. Isolde's carefully maintained composure cracked. What? The DNA confirmation is on page 12, Octavius pointed out helpfully. Orion Reed's genetic material was preserved alongside Vivienne's after their divorce. She always regretted ending that marriage under pressure from your grandfather. This is absurd, Isolde snapped, though her hands trembled slightly as she reviewed the documentation. Even if the science checks out, these arrangements were made when Mother was elderly, possibly not in her right mind. She was 62, Isolde, not 90, Thaddeus interrupted. And she was running Caldwell Enterprises successfully right up until her final illness. No one questioned her mental acuity then. Because we didn't know she was creating secret children through science fiction procedures, Isolde shot back. Valencia, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. Vivienne was the most clear-headed, forward-thinking person I've ever known. Everything she did was deliberate and considered. She created these children out of love, both for the possibility they represented and for me. Isolde's gaze cut to her. And what exactly was your role in all this? You're claiming to be their mother while knowing they're biologically your siblings. The arrangement seems convoluted at best, psychologically damaging at worst. I didn't know they were biologically related to me until yesterday, Valencia replied calmly. Vivian told me she used an anonymous donor. I agreed to carry her. Children because she had been kind to me when no one else was. Her marriage to my father ended because of family pressure, not lack of love. When she re-entered my life as an adult, she became a mentor and friend. Isolde's expression remained skeptical, but Thaddeus could see her calculating mind working behind her eyes. The documentation was too thorough, the genetic evidence too compelling. She was searching for a new angle. The Caldwell Trust bylaws are specific about inheritance, she said finally. Children born through artificial means, after a parent's 55th birthday, are excluded from automatic inheritance rights. It was added by father after that scandal with the Whitford family. Thaddeus had anticipated this. True, but that clause applies to the main family trust, not to mother's personal assets or the specific trust she established for the triplets, and certainly not to this cottage, which was her separate property from before her marriage to father. Not to mention, Octavius added mildly, that the procedure was completed when Vivian was 59. The embryos were frozen then, though not implanted until later. Legally, their conception date would be considered the date of fertilization, not implantation. Isolde's jaw tightened. She was running out of objections. What exactly do you want, Thaddeus? To introduce 3 12-year-olds as mother's secret children, to give them the Caldwell name. Have you considered the scandal, the media frenzy, the impact on the company's stock? I want them to have what mother intended. For them, Thaddeus replied firmly. The trust she established, this cottage acknowledgement of their place in the family, they don't need to be thrust into the public eye or given the Caldwell name if that's not what they want. But they deserve to know their heritage and to have the security mother wanted for them. Isolde studied him, then Valencia, calculating her options. Finally, she closed the folder. I'll need my own experts to verify all of this. Until then, I cannot agree to any changes in the family trust structure or any public acknowledgement of these children. It was as close to a concession as they were likely to get for now. Thaddeus nodded. Take whatever time you need for verification, but the trust mother established specifically for them will be unfrozen immediately, and they'll take possession of Moonlight Cottage as she intended. No. And what happens at the next board meeting when questions arise about why you're suddenly diverting company attention to a mysterious trust and 3 children no one has heard of? Isolde challenged. I'll handle the board, Thaddeus assured her, just as mother would have expected me to. Something in his tone must have convinced her that further argument was futile, for now. Isolde gathered her things and stood. This isn't over, she said quietly as she prepared to leave. These children may have mother's DNA, but that doesn't make them Caldwells, not truly. The crescents on their wrists say otherwise, Thaddeus replied, as does the DNA test showing our shared maternal lineage. They're as much Caldwells as you or I, Isolde. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for everyone. After Isolde and her lawyers departed, Valencia let out a long breath. She's terrifying. She's afraid, Thaddeus corrected, afraid of losing control, of having her position in the family and company diluted. She'll fight, but with the evidence we have, she can't win. Octavius cleared his throat. She's not entirely wrong about the potential for public scandal. We should discuss how to handle the triplets' introduction to the wider family, and whether to make their existence public knowledge at all. That's a decision the children should have input on, Valencia said firmly. They're old enough to understand the implications, at least partially. Thaddeus nodded in agreement. For now, let's focus on securing what Mother wanted for them. The trust, the cottage, their future. The rest can wait until they're ready. 3 months passed with remarkable swiftness. Spring bloomed across Willowgate, bathing the city in new greenery and fragrant blossoms. At Moonlight Cottage, the transformation was even more dramatic, both in the property itself and in the lives of those who now called it home. Valencia had initially been reluctant to leave the apartment above tidal pages, concerned about uprooting the triplets from the only home they'd known. But after their first weekend at the lake, watching the children explore the grounds with growing delight, her reservations had melted away. They'd moved in gradually, bringing treasured possessions from the apartment while discovering the items. Vivian had left in the cottage family photographs, art supplies, books that seemed chosen specifically with each child in mind. Thaddeus visited regularly, usually on weekends when the triplets were free from school. Today, he watched from the dock as Kian attempted to sail the small boat they'd found in the boathouse. Zara sketched the landscape from her perch on a boulder, and Meredith meticulously categorized the lake's ecosystem in a notebook. Valencia sat beside Thaddeus, both of them enjoying the peaceful scene. "They're thriving here," Thaddeus observed. "It's as if they were always meant to be in this place." Valencia smiled. Mother's intuition, perhaps. Vivienne knew they'd find happiness here eventually. They had fallen into the habit of referring to Vivian as Mother in their conversations, acknowledging their shared connection to her without needing to explain the complex familial relationships to outsiders. To the triplets, she remained Miss Vivian, a special figure in their history who had given them life in more ways than one. "Has Isolde made any further contact?" Valencia asked, though she already knew the answer. Thaddeus shook his head. "Not directly. Her lawyers continue to review the documentation, though I suspect it's merely a delay tactic. Octavius says the trust disbursements are proceeding without interference, so that's what matters most." What he didn't mention was the subtle campaign Isolde had been waging within Caldwell Enterprises, questioning his focus, suggesting to board members that his priorities had shifted away from company interests. So far, his position remained secure, but he was under no illusions about his sister's determination. "The children ask about her sometimes," Valencia said quietly. "They want to know if they'll ever meet their other sister." "What do you tell them?" "The truth. That Isolde needs time to adjust to their existence, and that not all family members connect in the same way." Thaddeus nodded, grateful for Valencia's wisdom with the children. They had discussed whether to tell them about their complex biological connection to her, that she was their half-sister as well as their mother, but had decided together that such information would only confuse them at this age. Perhaps when they were older, they could understand the full story. "Speaking of family connections," he said, changing the subject, "the children's school forms list me as an emergency contact now. Thank you for that trust." Valencia watched, Meredith examining a water sample with the portable microscope Thaddeus had given her. "You've earned it. You've been here for them consistently, just as you promised." It was perhaps the highest compliment she could pay him, acknowledging that he had become more than a visitor or distant benefactor in the triplets' lives. He was their brother, their protector, a constant presence they could rely on. From the water, Kian waved excitedly. "Uncle Thad, look! I figured out how to tack!" Uncle Thad had been the triplets' solution to the awkward question of what to call him. Not quite a father figure, more than a distant relative, the honorary title had stuck. Thaddeus waved back, shouting encouragement as the small boat executed a wobbly turn. "Have you given any more thought to the fall?" Valencia asked as they watched Kian's sailing efforts. The private school offered all 3 scholarships once they saw their test scores. It was a subject they'd been discussing carefully. The triplets had been attending public school, but with their trust now active and their academic abilities becoming apparent, other options had emerged. "It should be their choice," Thaddeus said, repeating what had become something of a mantra between them. "And yours. Don't let my opinion sway what's best for your family." Valencia gave him a knowing look. "They are your family too, Thaddeus. Your opinion matters to all of us." Before he could respond, his phone vibrated with an incoming call. The screen showed Octavius's number. "Excuse me," he said, stepping away to answer. "Octavius? What's happened?" The lawyer's voice was grave. "Isolde has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. The agenda includes a motion to evaluate your fitness as CEO due to personal distractions affecting company performance." Thaddeus had expected something like this eventually, though perhaps not so soon. "She doesn't have the votes to remove me." "Under normal circumstances, no, but she's been building support quietly and, Octavius sighed. "She's planning to present evidence of the triplets' existence to the board, framing the situation as your attempt to introduce illegitimate claimants to the Caldwell fortune. She's suggesting your judgment has been compromised by sentimentality." The strategy was classic Isolde: attack what she perceived as weakness, create doubt among allies, and strike at the moment of maximum vulnerability. Thaddeus had been so focused on protecting the triplets that he'd underestimated her determination to protect her own position. "I'll be there," he said firmly. "And Octavius, bring the full documentation about Mother's reproductive choices. All of it. If Isolde wants to make this public within the company, then she'll have to accept the complete truth, including Mother's deliberate choice to recreate her family with Orion Reed, rather than continue the Caldwell bloodline through traditional means." After ending the call, he returned to Valencia, who immediately sensed his tension. "What's wrong?" "Isolde is making her move," he explained briefly. "She's called a board meeting to question my leadership based on my involvement with the triplets." Valencia's expression grew worried. "Will this put your position at risk?" "Possibly," he admitted. "She's been laying groundwork with board members, but I've been preparing for this too." They watched the children in silence for a moment. Kian, now helping Zara position her sketching materials on the boat for a different perspective of the shore. Meredith carefully labeling specimen jars with her precise handwriting. "They can't know about this," Valencia said finally. "They already worry about being a burden. If they thought they were causing problems for you—" "They're not," Thaddeus interrupted firmly. "Isolde is the one creating problems. The children are innocent in all this." Valencia nodded, but her concern remained evident. "What will you do?" Thaddeus considered the question carefully. For months, he'd been trying to balance his sister's sensitivities with the triplets' needs, hoping Isolde would eventually accept the situation. That approach had clearly failed. "I'm going to do what Mother would have done," he said finally. "Protect the family. All of the family, regardless of the professional consequences." The following morning, Thaddeus entered the Caldwell Tower boardroom precisely 5 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to begin. To his surprise, every seat was filled. Board members who typically called in remotely had made the effort to attend in person. Isolde had clearly conveyed the significance of this meeting. His sister sat at the far end of the table, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that emphasized her Caldwell bearing. She had arranged her allies strategically around the table, creating the impression of widespread support for whatever she planned to propose. Octavius slipped in behind Thaddeus, carrying a leather portfolio containing all the documentation they'd discussed. Thaddeus nodded, greeting to the board members as he took his seat at the head of the table. "Thank you all for making time for this unexpected meeting," he began calmly. "I understand my sister has concerns she wishes to address." Isolde wasted no time on preliminaries. The board deserves transparency about recent developments affecting Caldwell Enterprises' leadership, she announced. For the past several months, Thaddeus has been increasingly absent, distracted by personal matters that directly impact his judgment regarding company assets. She activated the presentation screen, displaying financial records. These records show transfers of significant sums from Thaddeus's personal accounts to an entity called Luna Holdings. More concerning are his attempts to unfreeze a trust established by our mother under questionable circumstances. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Thaddeus maintained his composure, allowing Isolde to continue. The beneficiaries of this trust are 3 children who have suddenly appeared, claiming to be our mother's biological offspring despite the medical impossibility of such claims. Thaddeus has not only accepted these claims without proper verification, but has actively worked to grant these children access to Caldwell assets. She displayed a photograph on the screen, clearly taken with a telephoto lens, showing Thaddeus with the triplets at Moonlight Cottage. These children and their guardian have been installed in a Caldwell property. They've been given access to resources that rightfully belong to legitimate family members and, by extension, to the shareholder interests this board represents. The board chairman, Howard Barnes, cleared his throat. Isolde, while we appreciate your concern, family matters are not typically board business unless they directly impact company operations. They do impact operations, Isolde insisted. Thaddeus has missed critical meetings, delegated key decisions, and diverted attention to these. Interlopers at a time when Caldwell Enterprises faces significant competitive challenges. Thaddeus had heard enough. He stood slowly, commanding the room's attention. My sister has presented a carefully curated version of events, he said evenly. Allow me to provide context. The children she refers to are indeed our mother's biological offspring, conceived through advanced reproductive technology using tissue preserved before medical procedures limited her natural reproductive capability. He nodded to Octavius, who distributed folders to each board member. You'll find complete documentation within, including DNA verification, medical records, and our mother's explicit instructions regarding these children's place in the family. Isolde's expression tightened as board members began reviewing the materials. Even if the science is valid, which remains questionable, these children were conceived when mother was of advanced age, possibly not of sound mind to make such decisions. Vivian Caldwell was serving as chairwoman of this very board when these decisions were made, Thaddeus countered. None of you questioned her mental acuity then. In fact, several of you praised her forward-thinking leadership during that period. He turned to address the entire board. What my sister has not shared is that these children, Kian, Meredith, and Zara, were deliberately kept secret by our mother to protect them from exactly this kind of situation. She feared they would be rejected by certain family members more concerned with power and control than with honoring blood ties. Isolde stood abruptly. This is absurd. Mother would never— There's more, Thaddeus interrupted, his voice calm but firm. The final page in your packets contains DNA verification of the children's paternity. Their father was Orion Reed, our mother's first husband, whom she was pressured to divorce by our grandfather despite their mutual affection. Mother used preserved genetic material from both herself and Orion to create these children, entrusting them to Orion's daughter to raise. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Vivian Caldwell, the formidable matriarch who had guided Caldwell Enterprises through its most profitable decades, had secretly created children that represented not the Caldwell lineage, but her first forbidden love. This doesn't change the fact that these children are a distraction, Isolde insisted. Though her argument had clearly lost momentum, their existence, regardless of biology, has compromised Thaddeus's focus on company matters. Howard Barnes, looked up from the documentation, his expression thoughtful. "Thaddeus, how do you respond to this specific concern?" Thaddeus had anticipated the question. "My responsibility as CEO has never wavered. Our quarterly results, which you all received last week, show growth exceeding projections across all divisions. What has changed is my personal priority to honor my mother's final wishes regarding these children, my siblings." He looked directly at Isolde. Family obligations and business responsibilities are not mutually exclusive. Our mother understood this better than anyone. She built this company while raising us, never sacrificing one for the other. The board chairman nodded slowly. "I see no evidence of performance issues that would warrant the extreme action Isolde has suggested. Unless other board members disagree, I believe this matter falls outside our purview." Murmurs of agreement circulated the table. Isolde's carefully orchestrated coup was disintegrating before her eyes. "This isn't just about performance," she said, making a final attempt. "It's about judgment. Thaddeus has unilaterally decided to acknowledge these children without considering the potential impact on the Caldwell name, reputation, or legacy." Thaddeus remained calm. "The Caldwell legacy is more than stock prices and real estate holdings, Isolde. It's about integrity, compassion, and family loyalty, values Mother exemplified throughout her life. I'm simply continuing what she began." One by one, the board members closed their folders. Howard Barnes cleared his throat. "Unless there's other business requiring the full board's attention, I suggest we adjourn and allow the Caldwell siblings to address their family matters privately." The message was clear. The board was removing itself from what it now recognized as a personal conflict. As members filed out, several nodded respectfully to Thaddeus. A few cast curious glances at Isolde, whose rigid posture betrayed her fury. When they were alone except for Octavius, who remained discreetly near the door, Isolde finally spoke. "You've won this round, but don't think it's over," she said, her voice low and controlled, despite her obvious anger. "Those children will never be true Caldwells, regardless of DNA results or birthmarks." Thaddeus approached his sister, stopping when they were face to face. "They already are true Caldwells, Isolde. They have Mother's compassion, her creativity, her resilience. Perhaps that's what frightens you most, seeing her reflected in them when you've worked so hard to erase her influence from your own life." Her hand moved so quickly he almost didn't see it coming. The slap echoed in the empty boardroom, more shocking for its loss of control than its physical impact. "You know nothing about my relationship with Mother," Isolde hissed, eyes bright with unshed tears. "She chose you from the beginning, then she created those children to replace us both." "She wasn't replacing anyone," Thaddeus said gently. "She was completing her family, the one she always wanted with Orion before our grandfather interfered. The triplets aren't a threat to your position or mine. They're children who deserve to know their heritage." Isolde gathered her documents, composure gradually returning. "This conversation isn't over." "No," Thaddeus agreed. "But perhaps the next one can be about healing rather than control." As he watched his sister leave, Thaddeus knew the path. Forward wouldn't be easy, but at Moonlight Cottage, 3 children with crescent birthmarks were waiting, family worth fighting for, just as their mother had always believed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.